The gate groaned in the wind, a hinge crying out like a wounded thing. Elias Boone stood there, hat brim low against the glare, boots sunk in dust that hadn't seen rain for near a season. Heat shimmered over the horizon, bending the outline of the wagon rolling slow across the desert floor. 3 long months, they said, he'd waited for her. 3 long months staring down that road, counting letters that never came, until the promise of a mail-order bride became the only light left in his hollow house. Now the wagon rattled closer, its wheels coughing clouds that stung the throat like dry smoke. The driver snapped his reins, mules snorting, sweat glistening dark against their hides. Elias's fingers tightened on the gatepost, rough knuckles whitening. He searched through the haze for the figure he had built a life around in his mind. A woman young, willing, soft enough to carry away his loneliness. But when the canvas flap lifted, the desert gave him something else. She stepped down slow, boots touching the earth like she belonged to it. A widow's black dress, faded and worn, clung to her shoulders. Her eyes were rimmed with road dust, yet steady, holding the kind of weight that does not bend. Behind her spilled 5 children, ragged, sunburned, sharp with hunger. The smallest clutched her skirts. The eldest carried a bundle that looked heavier than his years. Their shadows stretched long in the burning light, 6 strangers at the threshold of his quiet land. Elias's chest hollowed. His throat rasped like sand against stone. This was no bride from St. Louis. This was no woman written in letters sealed with promise. This was a burden the whole county would laugh about before sundown. The widow lifted her chin, measuring him without a word. Wind tugged strands of hair loose from the knot at her neck. She did not flinch beneath his silence. Instead, her gaze drifted to the rifle hanging over his porch, black iron polished by use, a weapon whispered about by men who once knew the name Boone the Black. Her children saw it too. The eldest boy froze, staring with something between fear and awe, as though he'd just caught sight of a legend standing upright in the dust. The mules brayed, stamping restless. The driver flicked his hat in a half salute, eager to move on, leaving behind the rattle of wheels that faded quick into the heat. The land fell silent, but for the hiss of wind across dry grass. Elias Boone's heart beat like hooves on hardpan, the rhythm of a man cornered by fate. He had waited for a bride, but the desert had sent him a widow, and 5 pairs of young eyes that would not look away. The hammer struck fence post to rock, each blow ringing across the valley like a bell calling out her defiance. Margaret Calloway swung hard, arms taut, sweat darkening the fabric at her back. The children hauled wire, their small hands raw, yet none complained. Dust curled up with each step, clinging to their clothes, clinging to her resolve. Elias Boone watched from the shade of the corral, jaw set, silence thick as the desert air. The widow had taken hold of his land as if it were her own, moving with a certainty that unsettled him. Every sunrise, she was already working. Every dusk, she was still standing, a lantern glowing beside her. Word carried fast to Dry Creek. Laughter rose in the saloon, whiskey spilling as men mocked the lonely rancher saddled with a woman and 5 mouths he never asked for. Cards slapped, spurs clinked, and more than one voice said he'd been played for a fool. But whispers cut sharper in the corners. At the mercantile, women bent heads together, muttering how the widow held her chin high when others might have broken. A few said Elias had found himself a woman stronger than most men. One evening in town, the laughter turned cruel. Silas Crane leaned on the hitch rail, his boots polished, his hat shadowing eyes cold as a rattler's. Behind him lounged his riders, their coats heavy with pistols. The widow crossed the street with her children close, basket in hand. Crane's voice slithered through the heat. Well, now look what the desert blew in. Widow and whelps. Dry Creek's charity case. The riders chuckled low. One spat tobacco into the dirt, another tug at the eldest boy's bundle. Margaret's hand snapped, sharp as a whip, pulling it back. "Keep your hands from my children," she said, steady as a church bell. Crane's smile twitched, but his eyes never softened. Bold words for a beggar set up on another man's spread. Elias Boone's boots struck the boardwalk then, the sound heavy, final. He said nothing, only stepped to her side, his shadow long against hers. The rifle slung across his shoulder spoke louder than any word. The laughter hushed, though whispers crawled quick through the saloon windows. Boone the Black, the name some had not dared say in years. Margaret never flinched. Her gaze locked on Crane until he gave a thin laugh and tipped his hat, stepping back slow, leaving behind dust and the smell of fear he pretended not to carry. The children's eyes shone wide, but their mother's voice stayed even. "Come along," she said, and they followed. The street fell quiet in their wake. Men whispered, women stared, and the wind carried the sound of it through town like a warning bell. Some said the widow had fire in her bones. Others swore it was Boone's shadow returning. Either way, Dry Creek would not forget that night. The cattle bawled in the night, wild-eyed and restless, their hooves pounding the corral dust. Fence posts lay splintered on the ground, wire cut clean as bone. The smell of poison clung sharp at the well, a bitter sting riding the wind. Elias Boone strode through the dark with his lantern high, light throwing ragged shadows across the ranch yard. Behind him, the children stirred, faces pale in the glow. Margaret was already there, rifle in hand, her silhouette fierce against the wavering flame. The first shot cracked from the mesquite. Bark split, lantern glass shattered, and darkness swallowed them whole. The children cried out, but her voice cut through steady. "Down! Crawl low!" Elias answered with his rifle, muzzle flashing, report echoing against the canyon walls. Shapes scattered in the dark, horsemen wheeling back, their laughter ragged, cruel. Bullets whined through the yard, tearing boards, sparking off stone. Margaret dropped to one knee, shouldered her weapon, and fired. Her shot struck true. A rider tumbled from his saddle, the horse screaming into the night. She worked the lever smooth, breath calm, as though she had done 100 times before. The eldest boy dragged his siblings behind the trough, eyes wide but jaw set, whispering courage to keep them still. Traps the children had laid, ropes drawn tight, caltrops scattered, caught another rider, pitching him hard into the dirt. The ranch turned battleground, dust and smoke thick, hearts hammering with every cry. Elias saw her then, Margaret Calloway, framed in the sparks of gunfire. No helpless widow, but a soldier's shadow, eyes hard as tempered steel. Between volleys she spoke low, her words steady even as bullets cracked. "My husband fought through war, Boone. Raiders came often. I learned quick." Her rifle barked again, and another man fell. Elias's blood surged, the ghost of Boone the Black clawing its way to the surface. He fought like the man he once was, but it was her steel, her unflinching calm, that held the night together. When the riders finally pulled back, their curses fading into the hills, silence fell heavy as stone. Smoke drifted on the wind, broken fence posts jutting like grave markers in the dirt. The children crept from cover, wide-eyed but unbroken. The youngest clung to Margaret's skirts. The eldest stood proud though trembling. Elias lowered his rifle, chest heaving, and looked upon the widow with something close to awe. She met his stare without words, lantern light catching the grit on her face, the fire in her eyes. The desert wind rose, carrying the sound of coyotes, carrying the promise of more riders yet to come. Word was already spreading. Crane would not forgive, and he would not forget. The storyteller's voice lingers. That night the ranch stood, but the land knew a storm was coming. And in its heart burned not just Boone's shadow, but the widow's fire. The horizon bled red as the first light clawed its way over the buttes. Hoofbeats rolled like thunder across the valley floor, a storm of riders bearing down, dust boiling behind them. Silas Crane rode at the front, coat whipping, pistol glinting in the newborn sun. Elias Boone stood at the gate, rifle raised, breath steady. The widow was beside him, skirts torn, eyes sharp, her weapon braced against her shoulder. Behind them, 5 children crouched low, faces pale, but set with a courage not born of choice but necessity. The earth shook. Crane's voice cut the morning. "Burn him out. Leave nothing standing." His men fanned wide, guns lifted, war cries tearing at the silence. The first volley split the air. Bullets tore through fence rails, splinters flying. Elias fired, the crack of his rifle rolling deep through the valley. One rider pitched backward, blood spraying across the dust. The men behind Crane faltered. Whisper or not, some swore it was the return of Boone the Black, the ghost gunfighter riding the land again. But it was Margaret who broke the fear. Her rifle thundered, each shot true, each movement calm. She felled one, then another, her voice cutting sharp. "Hold your line, Elias. They'll break." The eldest boy darted forward, yanking a rope free. Posts toppled, dragging wire across the ground. Horses screamed, hooves tangling, riders tumbling hard into the dust. The children shouted, scattering caltrops, turning the ranch yard into a snare. The battle boiled in smoke and fire. Crane roared, charging through, his pistol spitting flame. He bore down on Margaret, intent to crush her where she stood. She did not move. She raised her rifle, eyes locked, and fired. The shot split the morning. Crane jerked, staggered, pistol falling from his grasp. His horse reared, shrieking, before throwing him hard into the dirt. Silence followed, sudden and deep, broken only by the ragged breath of men who'd lost their courage. One by one, his riders pulled back, heels spurring, dust carrying them away like shadows fleeing dawn. Elias lowered his rifle slow, the weight of years pressing heavy in his chest. He turned to her. Margaret stood tall, rifle smoking, her children gathered around. The sun lit her face, not soft, not yielding, but carved in fire and resolve. The ranch still stood. The widow still stood. And Boone, the man who had waited for a bride, found something far greater at his side. The storyteller's voice carried, low and certain. And so they say, when the desert tried to swallow them whole, a widow's fire burned hotter than any sun. Boone the Black's legend lived on, but it was Margaret Calloway, mother of 5, who carved her name into Dry Creek's dawn. Her courage was the tale men carried, and her defiance the song the desert wind never let die.